Okay, in this video we're going to start off on what will hopefully be a productive and fruitful explanation about not only what classes are and how to use them, but how to create them and how to think about using them, which really is more to it than just actually typing in the code from a book you might see. Here's a little interface that I've come up with, and this is a very simple example, but I'm going to sort of take it into the realm of classes as we go along, and I'll start off simple and we'll get into designing it and so forth. So what you see here is a form with 3 labels, and in each label I have string 1, string 2, and string 3, just so we can have something to manipulate. I've got a color button, a font button, and an exit button. And what we'll start off doing here is creating some code that we'll call a color picker, and we'll apply whatever the user selects to all 3 of these labels. And then the font picker will be called when you click on the font button, and that will apply whatever font, and then strike through, bold, italic, whatever fonts features they happen to select to the text in all 3 of the labels. Now, often you'll be faced with a form that will be used in one application in multiple ways, so that you don't have to recreate a form every time you want to click on something when they're very similar. And not only that, but you'll often want to set form states. By that I mean the states of the controls, whether they're visible or not, enabled or not. If you have a form that has tabs on it, which is often the case, you'll have the same controls on that form that perform differently depending on which tab has been clicked. And you don't want to load up a form with 50,000 buttons, and of course 50,000, but let's say you have 4 tabs. Well, you don't want 4 times as many controls as what you could do by simply manipulating the state of the form and the controls depending on what the user has done. Now, this whole concept goes back to Microsoft's Office. If you'll think about it, you'll see what I mean. Everything is context driven in the Microsoft Office suite, or the browser, or whatever you happen to be doing. Internet Explorer is context driven. Otherwise, there would be so much in one of these applications that not only would it run slow and be huge, but the user wouldn't know what to do with it. Or they might start trying to do something on an object that they shouldn't be able to do. So an example of context-driven programming is when you're in Word and you have an image in the Word document. If you have the image selected, then all of a sudden there's a format menu available, which is split into 2 parts. It will enable you to format the how the image behaves when it's around text, the image style, the size. There's all these predefined formats for the image where you've got a smoky perimeter, or it can be turned into an oval or whatever. Now, if you deselect that image, you will notice that you don't have any way of getting to those menus, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, the most obvious reason is, you don't want the user formatting an image when they don't have it selected. You got a big problem, or you have a lot of error handling issues to deal with. Additionally, and more importantly, is there's so much functionality in these programs now that if you displayed all that functionality to the user, it would be information overload. Besides that, there's not enough real estate on most monitors to display all that. So context driven, it means it shows you what it needs to show you based on the context of what the user is doing. All right. Now, if that makes sense to you, we'll try to get it back to the object-oriented example. Now, in order to use a color picker, and some of you have done this already in one of our examples, and I hope you have. And there are other things too. There are calendars, there are progress bars, all sorts of things. There's date time pickers. There's just tons of these little apps that you can use. And let's see if I can find the ones there's font dialog and color dialog. Now most of you will just drag it and drop it over here and it shows up down here, right? Okay, and you can do that. That's fine, except when you're not working with a form, when you're working with a class itself in a class file. There's nowhere to drag and drop these things. So how are you going to use them? Well, you have to know how to use them without dragging and dropping. And as a matter of fact, you can do this with any control. You can do it with button objects. A lot of times you want to create buttons on the fly. How do you do that? The program can't stop. Wait a minute, user, let me open up the toolbox and drag and drop and wait on the programmer to drag and drop this stuff onto the form. And then it doesn't work that way. That's not available at the time of execution. So often you will need to instantiate, inherit and instantiate these things on the fly. So let's go to the code, and here obviously I've got the 3 buttons, one of which is the exit button. And I've got my button color click event handler and my button font click hanger. So let's just go ahead and start with the button color. The first thing you'll want to do is create a object or a variable of type color dialog, because that's what that was that I just dragged and dropped on there. So I'm going to go ahead, and you've been doing this. What if it was an integer? Well, an integer is an object too, just like a color dialog or a message box or anything else. Now I'm going to use the DLG for the prefix. Now this is the child, or this is my variable, if you will. All right, you can call it whatever you want. I called it DLG my color. I'm creating a child from the parent, just like you would if you were doing an integer. Dim my integer as integer. Well, what are you doing? You're creating your variable integer or your child integer from the parent class, which is the integer class or the double class or the message box or whatever it happens to be. Everything is an object. So it's color dialog, and there it is. Okay. Now, once this line is executed, everything is fine, and often you can get by with this, but sometimes you need to actually instantiate it. And to do that, use the new keyword and then the base class, which is color dialog. All right, so that takes care of that. All right, so that inherits from the base class and breathes life into it by instantiating it. Now I need a variable, or another one of type color, and I'm going to call this color my color as color. This is an object. It's intrinsic object in VB. You don't have to color. All this stuff is available to you, and I'm going to set this equal to nothing just so I can wipe out any memory that happens to be there. Use nothing when you're working with an object other than something like an integer or numeric or string or Boolean. Now you can show this dialog at the same time that you're testing to see if what they've returned back to you is a cancel button, because we want to ignore cancel. You don't want to try to assign a cancel button, or you don't want to try to assign color if they've clicked cancel, because there is no color there. It's set to nothing. And if you try to, label string 1.4 color equals color my color when there's nothing coming back from the dialog box, will cause you all sorts of heartburn. So, and again, there are different ways to do this. This is not the only way, but I'm going to go ahead and set my color here in this statement. We'll go ahead and show it. Show dialog is what shows it. If what that returns is not cancel, and again, you don't have to type in all of this, windows.form. This shows the hierarchy of inheritance, by the way. Dialog result, and you've seen this example as well. For those of you who are popping up a little message box in the form closing event, remember that? So dot cancel. So if what they've clicked on is not the cancel button, then we can go ahead and do our thing. That means that they have selected forms.windows state. Sorry. Is it forms? Let me get my stuff straight. Windows. What did I do? Oh, this must have just popped up because I mistyped it. Try this again. Windows. Dot. What in the world is going on? Maybe it's just forms dialog box. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, that'll work. My fault. I'm working in 2010 on this computer, which is very similar but a little bit different. Same but different, right? If that's true, then we're good. They've selected, they didn't click cancel, so we can go ahead and do our thing here. So let me go ahead and store my color from that which they selected. And that comes from the color property, color object. All right. Now what we want to be able to do is to go ahead and set our label controls. One.color equal to what I just know. ForColor, sorry. ForColor equal to what I just grabbed from my dialog box. And I'll do the same thing for the other two labels as well. Alright, so there's string 2 and string 3. These are labels. Alright, we'll save this and run it and see if we get any errors. Alright, there we have our program, and there's our code that's going to run. And then there's our dialog box. I'm going to select just anything. Click OK, and as you can see, it applied that. Now, what we've done here is we didn't drag and drop these objects on here because you really hadn't been doing that all except for certain things like buttons and labels and so forth. But for data types, you haven't been doing that. They're objects too. You've been using these dim. You just haven't used the new keyword. And the difference is, here you just put dim I as integer equals 0. Well, I would be the child. Integer would be the parent. And now what I'm doing here, and to use an integer, you don't have to instantiate it like you do some of these other more complex objects. So the new keyword breathes life into it and it instantiates it. And that's the difference. Color dialog is the base object. Everything is an object, including an integer or a Boolean or a string or whatever. And so that sort of sets us up to do the font next. All right, let's take a look at that real quick. All I'm going to do is copy and paste this over here and just change it to a font. Font dialog, I think is what I want here. Yeah, font dialog object. Different object does a different thing. And I'm going to change this to my font. And again, this will be FNT. This is just a naming convention. My font again set as font. And again, this would be font. Be my font. That returns back the font. All right. Whoop. What in the world? I must have hit Control-C twice. All right. Font. All right, so that's good. So that's going to be my font. All right. I don't know what's going on with that. Let's see if we can get it to go away by. Nope. Where is my error list? Where's my error list at? There it is. System drawing.color. What have I done? Font, dialog, font, nothing. Show dialog. What in the world's going on with that? All right, well, let me see if I can investigate this. I'll just pause momentarily and be right back. Okay. It might help if I knew what I was typing. This would be font. No wonder it didn't like that. That fixes it. Boy, these late night classes are tough. All right. I shouldn't complain. I'm glad I have a job. And I'm glad I have a job teaching such fine folks as you. All right, here we go. Let's run it now and see what we get. All right, color, again, we'll just pick something. Blue. All right, font. Is it going to hose on me? Ah, how about that? I thought it was going to choke. Bold, 12, strike through. Look at that. It works. Hot dog. All right. Pretty cool. All right. Well, let's just say that we have completed video 1, and I'll see you at video 2.